And we are live. Welcome back for another one of our podcasts. This time we're going to be reviewing the podcast that we sent out on Friday, which was Daren Henderson. Now, Daren Henderson has had a fantastic career. It's a great podcast to listen to of how he came from Sky TV, built a business up over a 10-year period, and sold a multi-million-pound company. I think it was about 2020 to 22. And yeah, we're basically here now to debunk exactly what went on in that conversation and take any gold out that we thought were really good pointers for everybody in the community to be striving for within their businesses and achieve, which is what he wants to do. Perfect balance between life and business. Tools down, profits up is what we called it. So we are here now. Guys, what did you think of the podcast? I'll shoot it over to Ian first because Rob's got a poorly throat. We don't want to bother him too much.
I loved it. I absolutely loved it. I got back, I listened to it yesterday. I listened to about 80% of it yesterday and then caught the last 20% of it this morning on the way back from the school drop. Really simple, easy wins, I think, for a lot of people to take away. And it's nice to we've had some amazing guests on, but this is really good because this is such a relatable story, I think, for a lot of people to someone that he didn't know anything about driveways, did he, when he started? But he built something from scratch with a theory, with an idea, and it worked. And I think that is just in its own right a really cool story for people to listen to. So if you're listening to the review, you haven't listened to the actual pod, it's well worth the 45 minutes episode because you'll take a lot of key points from it. One thing that stood out for me, that as someone that's just started a business a couple of years ago and someone that's got a lot of friends in trades and someone that's got a lot of friends that own a business as a solopreneur, I would say, as like an individual business owner, was when he was talking about if you only charge enough to pay yourself, then you will only ever have a job that you own. You won't have a business that you own. And actually, to get more money and get more profits, to start employing someone, you have to charge more. You have to make a key amount of profit to actually get your business in a point where you can start to run a business, not create a job. I thought that was really eye-opening because a lot of people look at it and say, if my business turns over X with X costs, that's enough for me to earn a salary, without thinking of the bigger picture. So I can't remember the exact phrase, but it was something like, you've got a job rather than a business. I think you're a job owner rather than a business owner, I think he said.
Yeah. It's a shit.
Powerful that was. Really, I looked at it, I was like, so many people own a job and don't own a business, even though they're on company's house. I thought that was really strong.
Massive, mate. The amount of people I speak to, and you start to see pictures build up when you're speaking to business owners. Rob will be the same. You're dealing with tons and tons of business owners. And one of the things that they'll do is they hold all hats. They do everything within the business. And if you actually, one thing I really liked, and I think it's a good exercise for people to probably do at home, and looking at the businesses, is work out how many hours you're actually working and take into consideration the time when you're at home doing the books, or you're driving to jobs on a Saturday, or you're doing this, that, and the other. And he's gone through one of the first things he does with his clients, which I thought was really good, is this exercise. And then he works out how much money they're actually earning per hour. And shockingly, like from what I've spoke to him outside of the pod, so me and Daren are friends actually, but it's like 80% of the people he's dealing with who are coming to him for business advice. They're all exactly the same story, and most of them are on less than minimum wage. When you work out how many hours they work for the money that they're actually receiving, now weigh that up. You could actually be better off working in McDonald's a lot of the time, But the stress and all of the problems that come along, or difficulties, should I say, that come along with owning a business and those responsibilities, wow, it's really bad. And I see that all the time. It's one of the things that I do with people. Stop doing that. Stop doing this. It's not do things. It's actually taking things away more often than not than it is giving them something to do. What's your thoughts on that, Rob? What do you think when you get the business owners in? Is it something you've seen?
Yeah, I mean, like Ian was saying, like my former work, I saw a lot of trades that come through, And I actually sent this podcast out to some of those trades and said, you should listen to this, because some of them are in that conveyor belt of like, I can't get a break, I can't catch a break. And it's like, really, when you look at it, you have the same amount of hours as any other person. So you can't make hours to make more money. So the only way you can charge that to get more money is to charge more money for the hour that you're working. And I think a lot of them struggle with that. And you have that bravado-ness of having, like, you know, I'm a business owner, I'm an entrepreneur, and then when you boil it down, like Ian, you were saying, it's like you're not necessarily an entrepreneur because you're just a solo entrepreneur and, like, you know, just doing the business. You're no different, and you're a slave. You can become a slave to your actual company. So I see it all the time with that, and obviously with clients I coach now, they might be business owners, but even if they've got a couple of staff, they haven't got the systems and processes, that they're still a slave to be in that business 24/7. Like we did it. We talked about on a podcast, I think before, Dave, about, like, you know, exiting yourself out of that. And what I liked about Darren's one was that he thought about it immediately, going, I'm not going to be a guy that's in a van going around doing stuff. I'm going to be the guy that's going to be the operating person of all those vans, and that's going to be my job. So all of a sudden he set his levels to a different height of where he wanted to achieve stuff. And what I really liked mostly about it was, you'd assume that being a Forbes accredited coach, that would come with the prestigiousness of it, and you'd think, like, oh, I thought Daren was going to be a completely different character.
Yeah.
Because Forbes is like Forbes magazine, you know, but he was so down to earth and so relatable that you could meet him in a pub and not have to worry about it. You know what I mean? And like, you know, you talk to him and chat away to him, you wouldn't think that he's a Forbes accredited coach in that capacity.
No.
So
no, you wouldn't. You'd imagine, but yeah, I know what you mean. I've got that biased as well, where you think maybe suited and booted, very to the point, and he was just normal.
Yeah.
He's just come on live on here. I think it's Daren anyway, just his Facebook user. But the lowest wage I found with a tradesman at Trade Coach, which is his company, was £4.44 per hour. And this client was exceptional at his job, best in his industry. Now, £4, that's not even apprenticeship wage, is it?
I think he was talking about a veteran, wasn't he? Someone that had been in the military, and he actually said that his skill set was even stronger than his own business back when it was trading.
That's it. Yeah, the best I'd ever seen. £4.44 an hour, and that's allocating the hours of. This guy's probably earning, I don't know, a couple of £100 a day or whatever else it is. But that's based on what we calculate as a standard 8-hour day. You know, instantly goes into our head. What's the standard working hour? 9 to 5. Tradesmen don't work 9 to 5. That's when they're on the tools 9 to 5. But between 6 and 9 and 6 o'clock and 9 o'clock at night, you know, they're not. They're doing other things. And when you weigh those hours in, it makes for miserable reading, doesn't it?
And I know I got a lot of contacts and a lot of friends that are trades, and in particular, a good friend of mine is a gas fitter. And one of the things that I've seen him do over the last 12 years of his business is the aspiration to get more vans, get more people on the tools. But because he's an exceptional gas fitter himself, actually running a business was a big challenge. And when he had 5, 6, 7 vans, he actually crumbled, and the stress became too much for him. And he stripped it right back to 2 vans because it was easier for him to manage. And I think that's a common problem that a lot of tradies and business operators have. If they do manage to expand and grow, because they've started a business that they specialize in a skill set. You know, if we talk estate agents, you start your own business, you're an estate agent, you stay on the tools with your name above the door is the classic thing. And you never really retire from that job because you're constantly in the business. And if you do try to expand to 2 or 3 branches, that's normally where the big challenge comes for estate agents. And the same with tradies. And I think that comes from that kind of that business element of things and understanding how to run a business, which you don't really get taught. You're just in the fire, aren't you? You know, and that's what's beautiful about having a coach or having this type of podcast scenario and YouTube scenarios. You can get so much information to not let those problems happen by learning from people like Daren that have experienced it, that can share their knowledge in a 45-minute episode on a podcast like this, that you can not let that problem happen to you. And we did the same thing with our business. We brought in an action coach, a business coach, to transition us from being on the tools into high level running the business. And we knew the answers. But we needed accountability from a coach to get us 6 months down the line to where we wanted to get to. And I think a lot of people don't actually take advantage of that situation and don't spend the money on coaching. One thing that I wanted to talk to you, Rob, about, we mentioned it before, but I remember about 2 years ago when I did a mental health first aid course, one of the key things that stuck out to me is perception. Someone's perception is their reality. And it was quite interesting to hear Daren talk about how he set things up at the beginning. You know, the story of kind of putting flour all over himself to try and get someone's perception in the reality that he was working and he was busy. And then in the end, it came quite clean cut. And he was like, look, I look relatable. I'm not a salesman in a suit, but I'm not a tradie that's dirty. I turn up on time in my black Vans with my silver logo, with a T-shirt on that looks branded. The call answering service goes to an 0800 number, 1 for this, 2 for that. The whole professional element of thing was all a perception and all a perspective to create this reality, this illusion. But that, in a marketing point of view, and from someone like yourself, Rob, that's really into the mental health and how the mind works, that's so simple but so effective, right?
Well, I think, like, if you, from a mindset perspective, you have to have the belief of what you want to do effectively. Like, you know, who's my ideal self? So no different than how you set your business up, Ian. Like, you know, with Daren, it was like, what does my ideal business look like? People can get obsessed about it, but then it gives you the North Star to head towards. Like, when you come on, you come to get your vans. If you've got that perception in place, you go, okay, I want a van of this type because I want to be perceived this way. Or when I set my website up, I'm going to do this, not just random stuff in there, because that's when it gets confusing. You don't have an identity. And the same happens obviously with your mental health. Like, if you're in a particular position right now and you're like, okay, like, I'm fed up with myself now, I'm drawing a line. Who do I want to become? Like, who is my ideal self? And take the necessary small steps to achieve it. You have to have that vision. Like,
I think, and I think Daren's on, and he said, probably going back to what I was talking about there, lack of systems. Normally, you know, 100%. In fact, he said, it was me, but lack of systems is why people can't scale up. And I often think with myself, when I'm trying to elevate or do something next or take on the next challenge, the only way I'm able to do that is if I put 30 to 40% of my diary fully locked in, so that I go, right, this is the goal. How do I achieve the goal? Build the list of what I need to achieve, and then fill it into my diary so that they're untouchable appointments or scheduled time. And Daren was talking about, at the end, James said, you know, what's the number one tip you could give someone? And he was like, get up early, get up at 5 and spend that 2 hours where you're not distracted. No one can contact you, to be proactively working on the business. And I don't necessarily think you need to get up early, but what was key was the 2 hours of non-distracted proactive time. Whether you do that between 7 and 9, whether you do that between 5 and 7 or 12 and 2, I actually think that's irrelevant as long as it's scheduled in. And what a lot of people find is they do it between 12 and 2 and then they get distracted, they get busy, and they end up sort of not doing the allocated proactive time. And that's something that I really related to, because I was like, I need that proactive time, whether it's fitness, family, wealth, business, that window of time can't be overlapped. It has to be stuck to. Do you find that at the moment, Dave, for someone that's kind of, you're working on your businesses on a high level, you've managed to get to that point where you're kind of operating them from a helicopter view?
Yeah.
Do you find that kind of, those window of times is vital to making sure that carries on?
I mean, I think it's uber vital that it carries on, to be honest. The reference to the morning, I get it. It works for me. I just think that with families, it's an ideal time. But I get what you're saying. If your environment at home was slightly different, then maybe you'd have to find the time somewhere else. But it's about finding an element of time where you're not going to get distracted. If you can put yourself in an office at work and shut your door at 10 o'clock, then that's cool. But you've got to find that time. And in certain businesses, certainly on the trades, I would imagine that's going to be quite difficult because you're actually out on site all the time. For me, to be honest, that's all I do. I remember I spoke to, we employed a new member of staff, a new team member to come in January. And one of the things I said to them is, my job, you're going to hate me coming in, because my job is to break this company every time I come into it. That's all I think about. I just think about what can I do here to tweak it a little bit. Yesterday it was email signatures. Somebody showed me their email signature and completely raised my expectation level on what an email signature should look like. Never seen it before, but as soon as it was like, bang, that's going on the list. That's going on the list. But I think it's so important. I see huge growth really, really quickly, but I am in a privileged position that all I do is look at doing that. I don't get involved with the day-to-day, but it's ridiculously important for any business owner to allocate the time to look at this stuff. And even if you just spend 2 hours a day searching what you could be doing, it's the start, and it's going to start giving you some insights and some traffic light signals to be moving in the right direction. But yeah, you've got to do it. If you don't have to do it, it's just a lot more beneficial if you do.
What you're talking about there, biologically as well, we were talking off camera about going in the gym, and you're talking about going to the gym after this, and you're talking about looking at your businesses and breaking things that need improving, with not just to break them for the sake of breaking them, but to improve them. So right, I'm going to tear this apart so that it comes back better. Yeah. And in biological sense, the ultimate goal of going into the gym and with lifting weights is to break the muscle, is to tear the muscle fibers, because once you've torn the muscle fibers in the muscle, they grow back stronger the next time. And whether it's business or whether it's the body, it's the same goal, isn't it, really? If you do the same thing, your business won't grow, your muscles won't grow. You have to put them under tension, and you have to constantly evolve them. I saw Rob's boss Mark posted on, I think it was Facebook or LinkedIn, feeling like if you get left in the dust with AI at the moment, you're going to get left quickly. And the world we're in at the moment moves so fast that if you're in a hamster wheel in your business, it'll be out of date before you know it. And I think Daren was talking a lot about omnipresence, doing all the little things, Google page optimization, website optimization, social media, talking about the leaflet drop in either side of the road.
Yeah, what a great leaflet that was as well.
Doing everything. And then I loved the fact that he was saying, look, I'm going to come around. When he came to a particular client, they were then going to put an offer to the neighbours as well. So he didn't talk about it, but we spoke a lot about community, haven't we? Building a community with the project and the pack and the group and stuff like that. So that's what he was trying to do. He was trying to turn the neighbourhood into his community by saying, look, it's not just you, I'm going to put an offer out to all of your neighbours. So you can look out your door and see nicer driveways rather than just being the best house in the street, which no one wants to be. You want to be in the best street in the estate rather than the best house in the road. So I really like that as well. I thought that was really cool.
I think one of the things I liked was, and we touched on it as well, we have actually a bit of a conversation prior, and I want to cover it on here, is your value to your customers. So, we can go out 10%, probably quite easy. I actually do know outside of this that's now changed, and it's 25% that he does instantly, that he tells people to go out for. But I think what you brought up, Ian, is actually true as well. So it's like, you can't just up your price if you're offering the same level of service as you always did. So if you want to jump in your van, not do all of the hard work that it entails, not be committed and dedicated to putting out your content correctly, getting your vans all nice and clean, this, that, and the other. You can't just up your price. I think it's important. One thing to be looking at is we can all elevate these. What we need to be doing is having a target of what we want to earn. And then on top of that, how much does it cost to run a business of this scale and size? That's the money we need to earn. So you might want to earn 60 grand a year. You probably find it looks more like 100 grand a year when you're owning a business, because you've got a lot of associated costs that run there. But what we've got to be trying to figure out is, what can we do different to the next person, to our competition? Now, I know us guys do this within the estate agency world, and I do it in other businesses, but it's relative across the board. And I think what you were saying, Ian, it's about getting the marketing correctly to get your price up, but also you have to throw in a lot of these, these disciplines that you've got to do. You've got to be consistent on your offering, on what you're offering to people. And your offering, depending on what level it is, will also attract that level of client, I would say. What were your points on that, Ian? Because we were talking about it a little bit before.
Yeah, I think it was probably, if the podcast continued for another half an hour, I reckon Daren would have started talking about it. But it's the marketing. It goes back to the perception. And I think one thing that probably wasn't covered a lot on the podcast, because of the goal that we were going through and sort of unveiling, was if you want to charge more as a business, you have to tell your story. And I think he touched on the website story, you know, the fact that if you're using social media as an example, the goal of social media is to drive people to your website for it to convert. And if your website's pants, it won't convert. So if you want to charge more, everything has to be telling the same story and showing the same level of value and quality to demand the price that you're going to charge. I think he said he was charging 2 or 3 times what his competition was, but winning the jobs. And that's the story. It's the perception. It's the marketing message. And I was thinking about it in the car while he was talking about it. And I've got 4 agents. They're both pairs. They operate 5 miles apart. They have a different average fee by half. One is double what the other one is. But the ones that are lower arguably are better agents. They're more experienced. They know the market better. Their video quality is better. It's just the message and the confidence. And that's all it is. It's the message and the confidence. The marketing perception by the other 2 that charge the higher figures is a better storytelling message. And the confidence when they're sat there talking to the client to demand what they know they're worth is a confidence factor, and the ability to do it. And he mentioned that mindset shift and confidence. And the other guys, they could, if they did it, if they said this is what we charge, they get it. But they're scared and they don't do it. And as a result, they do twice the work for the same money as the other guys. And it seems crazy. And I've showed them that over the last year, but it's a fear factor. It's confidence and fear.
It's madness, isn't it? When you look at the figures as well, if they're double, if they did 2 out of 3 sales they would ordinarily get, they'd still earn more money than if they got the 3 at the original price, and have less work to do, more time to be doing the things that are actually generating the money coming in. It's crazy, isn't it?
And what's even crazier? What's even crazier is the 2 that charge the higher fee don't have kids, and the other 2 have got 5 kids between them. So they actually spend less time with their children because they don't have that confidence dictate that fee. And they could do because they're quality, like that absolute quality. But it's just a fear factor. And it's a shame, but it's very common in business, isn't it, Rob? I think, you know, that's our industry, but take it out. It's just very common.
We've seen it dozens and dozens of times with our clients over the years. Because, like you said, they go through that process of understanding lead generation, marketing, influence on it, that element to it. And then naturally it comes down to the fee part to it. And they go, oh, my marketplace won't accept a higher fee. And it's like, try it, edge it up. And the response always 6 months later after that is, how do you feel about it now? I wish I'd done it sooner.
Oh, massive.
Because like, and like some of them, like you said, like if it goes hand in hand, because you can't have market dominance at a low fee, because you end up having loads and loads of people running around, whether that's trades, state agency, all sorts of stuff. And that's when like what Daren was saying, like the service levels, the expectations, like that's when it starts to really drop, and you can't deliver what, like you were saying, what you fundamentally want to perceive to people out there. And then all of a sudden, like word of mouth afterwards is like, yeah, he said he was going to do all this and he didn't deliver. Like that's like, you want it to be, this trade came round, said he was going to be here on Friday to fit a boiler, and he was here at 9 o'clock. Like, I've never had anyone like that before, and he fit it in and he did it. Like that's a different perception, because that's what people will recommend afterwards, because that's a lot of the trades are sort of known for that. But I think, going back to what you were saying, like when you look at going back to self-worth, it's like you said, Ian, if you have to look at what you want in life as an individual. What does my lifestyle look like? It's not just necessarily my house or my car, but like, how do I get up? How do I interact with my kids? If I've got kids, if I'm older, whatever it might be, how many holidays I go on? What are those holidays? How much is that going to cost me on an annual basis? If it is 80 grand, you can't then go in and charge cheaper. You need to go, right, if I want to have that life, I've got to show up and go, no, I'm worth this for this hour. But like you said, you have to have the pitch. It's all in the pitch. It's all in the delivery. It's all in the setup before. Like if you go back to just traditional estate agency, I'm on portals, I'm on this, I'm on that, and it's just a comparison chart. It does come back down to like fee and what the value of the house you think it's worth.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to almost go in at any business. You have to go in there when you pitch of like, what actually makes you different? And that's a very, very, very hard question to answer to yourself. If your business, like you'll go back to EM with AI, if your business that doesn't have a clue what that is, you're the ones that are going to get left in the dust with like, you know, AI and a lot, because you can't even answer the question that someone wants an answer from. So how can you then feel like you want to charge more because you can't even answer it?
Yeah.
Like Mark always gave me a great story. He said, I once walked into a agency and their slogan was something like, we make things easy. Well, moving easy. And he said, I walked up to the front door and I tried to open the office door and it was jammed shut where it was stuck on a door. And he said, that's a perception. So like we make moving easy and you can't, you actually struggle to get in through our office door. And he's like, just put some oil on it. Come on. Like, then it's an easy move. Those are the micro things you can change to have that. And like, you know, Ian, with you especially, like if you look at your identity of avocado estate agency and the pink hoodies and stuff like that, that is a massive differentiating factor. Like you've been bold and said, look, I'm not scared of everyone else in the industry should look like this and I'm going to break it. And it can be quite scary, but those are the bits that you can then go out and go, this is why we're different. Not we're different, but I'm still in a suit, shirt, tie, you know, the normal practices.
Daren said, I can't remember the stat. Dave, you might remember the stat, but he said, I think it was 70, it was over 70%, 72, 78, 76%. They won't remember 76% of what you said in your valuation, in your sales pitch, in your first meeting. They won't remember over 70% of what you said, but they will remember how you feel. And that was very interesting, because one of the first things that I did when we launched was, and still now today, if anyone asks me my elevator pitch, I'll give it to you in 30 seconds, bang. And it all comes down to the fact that when I had my daughter, I did not want her to grow up and be embarrassed about what her dad did for a living. And I'd been embarrassed about what I'd done for a living, because it's embarrassing to say you're an estate agent when you introduce, because of the reputation of the industry. So to build a business that I was proud of, that she would be proud of to tell your friends about, is the purpose. That's the driving factor. When I say that to a client, especially one that's got kids, I don't lose that business because of how I've made them feel. And I think a lot of people listening to this can take a lot from what Daren said there about they won't remember the pitter patter, the pie chart, the stats, how many they won't remember that. They just remember how you made them feel. And that comes from the initial appearance to body language, to whether you were talking too fast, whether you were in and ahhing, whether you weren't confident in what you were saying, whether you were selling, whether you were overselling, whether you weren't listening, whether you did too much talking. All of that in that first hour conversation is how you make them feel. And if you get that wrong, you're not getting the business. You can't charge the fee.
And quite easy. I say quite easy on the pitches on that is to be asking the person questions, being curious about who they are as an individual. You know, not going in there from a trades perspective. If you've got trades listening out there, like yes, they're going to be diet buy and maybe double glazing, but it's like, why are they doing that? Show an interest in it. Like, I wanted to do this because I've worked out one of my children's bedrooms is getting too, the windows are getting too moldy and I don't want that health hazard there. And then you can then start to talk about it a bit more. But if you're just in there just to sell the product and not explore the person, they're going to make that's the essence of how you make someone feel when they leave. Because it's like that actual person, I felt heard by that individual, not just spoken to, doesn't it? One bit I like to cover on one of the bits of Daren is the incomplicated approach to how he set up and went about his business. And I see it from a lot of people's perspective of like, I'm going to set this up, and they go down this route and they research and I listen to this podcast and I listen to this book and I read this book, and then it just stays in a notepad somewhere without implementation, or they go, right, I want to run a marathon, and it's like you've never even run around the block. So why don't you start with running around the block first? So from your perspective, both setting up businesses, like Daren seemed quite right. I want to have X amount of vans, but it was very, very simple in his processes. Like, going to get a website. I don't really know what I'm doing on this website image wise, but I'm going to get this bit done here. And he still managed to build a successful business on that. Whereas a lot of people might still be stuck there going 10 months down the line, haven't launched a website because it's not yet perfect.
Yeah.
So like, what would be your biggest takeaways and what you've learned setting up businesses around implementation of processes and just pushing a button and saying, right, we're just going to go for it from now?
Dave, you go first, bud.
I'm hairline triggered on this, so I don't know why, but I'm pretty quick. I just like, it's all to do with your not even your business North Star, like where I want to be in life. So for me, I go backwards. Where do I want to be in life? What can get me to achieve that? None of the business, like Daren said, they're my babies. I really care about the business. I care about the people within the businesses, but the business itself doesn't really mean anything to me. But having that clear vision of where you want to be, and then you can start to backtrack it then. And if the step in front of me, if I see that it's more than 50% weighed towards the positive, I'm just going to do it. And I'll figure it out afterwards. But I don't fear like the unknown. I'm quite comfortable in the unknown. It's where I sit a lot of the time. So I'm quite comfortable. A lot of people aren't. But for me, I think, yeah, I just figure it out. Try it. Try it. If it works, what's the worst case scenario? You don't do it, you never know. Is it got too much cost behind it? Most of the things that I find that are things that we should be implementing into our business actually don't cost anything. It's more about grit, determination, and just making the right choice. So as long as it fits in within that, for me, go for it. And what I saw with Daren is, I think he always had this vision. He didn't want to be a driveway company. He quite openly said it. He wanted to be a millionaire and get himself away from the council estate Morehouse image of himself that he had at the time. And he found ways out of that with Sky TV. Out of that, he thought, right, well, I kind of need my own business now. I need to earn more money. And driveways came out of it. You know, he didn't leave school wanting to be a driveway. His dad didn't do driveways or anything like that. It was just, I reckon I could do this. But here's an interesting point, and it comes in again with your value to the client. What he seemed to do there was he came from a completely different industry and implemented things that he learned within a shirt and tie industry, if you like, systems, processes, corporate, maybe like KPIs and things like that that he'd been used to, and moved it into an industry that predominantly doesn't have that. Most tradesmen are one guy, and whatever's going on in his head that day is how that business is going to perform. There's kind of no structure to a business, and it's all them. And he brought he wanted to be a company owner and be in control of the certain bits and bobs that were going along. So I thought that was fantastic. And the value proposition in this is, what he did was, maybe without him noticing, because he didn't say it, was, what can I do that the other guys in my area aren't doing? So we've heard loads of times, and it's definitely in the estate industry, but it's in others, oh, this is a microclimate. Yeah, people don't pay that type of fee around here. Bullshit. So they're not human in here then. They've got completely different DNA and, you know, behavioral bias that anybody else has got. No. What the truth is, right now at the current service level, this is what people will pay for it. But if you're offering a better service and answering the pain points of the client, where it comes from what Rob was saying, I don't want moldy, but okay, well, you've got to think about cleanliness. Now I know that. I'm going to make sure that I'm going to be talking about how clean the site is. I'm going to make sure I'm going to be talking about X, Y, and Z. But without that conversation and figuring out, why do you want windows? Why do you want a driveway? Why do you want to sell your house? Whatever it is, you can never get to that. And I think he did a great job of figuring out what customers were complaining about within the industry. He aimed to tackle each one of the ones that he'd figured out, and it made him, he charged 2-3 times more than anybody else, and grew the company by far bigger than anybody else. So I rambled on a little bit there, and I hope I've answered your question.
I think,
what about you, Ian?
I think what I've learned, the generation above us, 50, I'm going to offend a few people here, 55 to 70, 75, that generation had a phrase which was speed kills the competition. Now, we're a more intelligent generation than that generation, just because there's more information for us to absorb. And what I've realized is the competition is not the competition. It's not about speed kills the competition. What I've learned is speed kills your excuses. The longer you wait for something, the more excuses you give yourself and more reason you won't do it. And in terms of like starting a business or elevating your career, a lot of it comes down to being decisive and making a decision quickly. And the longer you leave it, normally you'll end up making the result, you'll make the decision anyway. But the longer you leave it, the more chance you are of not doing it, or not doing it in a realistic timescale. And I talk a lot about be stronger than your excuses is like one of my kind of like little quotes that I really love to hear. Be stronger than your excuses, because you'll do things then. Like you give yourself an excuse, but be stronger than that. Still override it in your mindset, and speed will kill your excuses. And that means you'll have a better business. You'll get to the result faster, and you can get perfect later. Because let's be honest, no one's ever going to be perfect. So if you're waiting for the perfect website, if you're waiting for the perfect logo, if you're waiting for the perfect member of staff, it's not coming. It's just on you to make a decision. Yeah, you just got to take action and then deal with it afterwards. But if you don't take action, you get nowhere. It's just an idea. It's just a dream. So what I've learned, and I still struggle with this with people around me, because I've learned to be super fast and decisive. Sometimes it's right, sometimes it's wrong. But you get a lesson when it's wrong. You've taught yourself something. You know, if I run an ad and I don't research it and it doesn't work, I still learn something. I'm like, right, well, that didn't work. So it might be an expensive lesson, but I won't do it again. Exactly. If I never did it, I would never know. So I'm more intelligent by doing it wrong than not doing it at all. So that's a key takeaway, that listening to Daren, where he's talking about, right, I've got a lead, first lead, Sports Direct, Slazenger jumper, got the logo, wouldn't stick, stuck it under the table, went out there, looked the part, didn't hesitate, just took action, dealt with it, and the rest was history. So I think there's a lot of people that are hesitant on making decisions, that have got ideas. When you go, I've gone to a lot of training over the course of this year. I've spent a lot of money on personal development training, and what you see is serial note takers. Yeah, they're just writing notes after notes after notes after notes. And then in the mastermind groups that I'm in, you know, I've met with these people 8 days now over the course of this year. They still got the same problems. 8 days later, a whole year later, still the same problem than they had 12 months ago. Just writing notes and doing nothing with it. And that's a big thing for anyone, in whether it's running a marathon, whether it's starting a business, whether it's being healthier, spending more time with their kids, saving a relationship, whatever it is. If you do nothing, you'll get nowhere. If you take action, you'll find out something. It'll go one route or another. So that for me was quite interesting when he was talking about that jumper and the sticker and all of that element, because speed kills excuses. That's what I would say.
I go by a lot of clients who identify that might have that like perfectionism inside them. Is I always say to them, when you're in a process, always ask yourself, is it authentic to me or the business, versus is it perfect? Because then if you know yourself and you know where you want to go and you're authentic to yourself, or you know your business and it represents your business, the authenticity will come through, and it doesn't have to be perfect. So you go, is it authentic? Yes. Will it still resonate with who I want to go out to? Is it going to represent my brand? Is it going to represent us? Yep. Okay, push the button and go. Not, oh, I need to add this little tiny bit at the bottom of this to make it a little bit more perfect, or the website hasn't got this. And like you said, Ian, the clients who I work with, who just explorers, like they just explorers mindset. Right, let's just see how this goes. And if I fail, I'm not failing, I'm learning. But I always say, go by authentic over perfect.
I got back from America about 36 hours ago, and I always think about this, because in America, you go for breakfast, just simple breakfast, Denny's, like raw basic. Denny's breakfast, quality food. Don't get me wrong, not the healthiest, but great food. Comes out fast. It's tasty. It's not overly presentable, but the servers, they bring you out their water straight away, and they come and check that you're okay. They're polite. They're knowledgeable. They're efficient. not out of this world fantastic, but they're good at what they do. And at the end of it, they even have on the bit 18% is worth this much, 20% is this much, and 22% is this much. And this is what your expectation to tip them is.
Yeah.
But because you've had quite a good experience, and because it's seemed normal in America to tip that amount of money on a $60 breakfast, to give them $12 as a tip, you just do it. Whereas in England, if I went for breakfast at Bill's and spent 60 quid or 50 quid for the comparison, I wouldn't receive the service, I wouldn't receive the speed of which it came out, and I wouldn't be happy to give a £12 tip. I wouldn't even give a £5 tip if I went for breakfast at 50 quid. You just wouldn't. You probably put 3 quid down.
Round it up to whatever it is. Yeah,
it's just strange to think that, so different, and for such simple little 1% margins that was discussed a lot, in particular by kind of James and Daren on it, that you can get to that point. And I think that's what in the UK, whether you're a trade, whether you're an estate agent, whether you're a fitness professional, whatever, those little 1% can make a huge difference to your profit margin. Because as we all know, once you get into profit, once you get to that point of profit, little wins make big differences on your profit. When you hit the break-even mark, 10% turnover increase could be the difference of making £1 million profit or 100 grand profit. It could be the difference of making 10 grand profit or 100 grand profit. So those little things that you experience when you go to America that they do better than us, that it's very interesting. It's just the way it is, really interesting to kind of see. I don't know
I'll give you
I'll say
and I'll give you a good tip on that one for anyone listening out there. Like,
is it a $12 tip?
Yeah, $12 tip. Send it to me afterwards. I'll send you my details over. But like, we go back to what you were talking about, the perception Daren wanted to have on it. If you look at not service experience, like, there's a difference between service and difference between experience. Like, if your service is, I've come around, you fit a boiler, that's it, done, bosh, out. Experience, if you think about it from an experience perspective, it's like, how do you make someone feel whilst you're in that house, whilst you're living that service? But from a exercise, anyone out there, like, think of your business like an Airbnb and go, okay, like, what is a 10-star service, not a 5-star service? Like, what is the most craziest way of how we're going to deliver that experience out to someone? And then start to literally map it down, even if you think it's ridiculous, and then start to work back, going, what's a 9, what's an 8, what's a 7, what's a 6? And then you come back down to 5, and 5 would be like, oh, actually, that's still quite reasonable, but it would be better than the original 5 you had originally thought of.
Yeah.
And that's where you can make those marginal gains, because you're really thinking about, like, when I step through the door, X, Y, and Z, or what happens before the appointment or after the appointment or during it, and how do I give those moments of delight? That's what we call it Iceberg Digital. Like, how do we create moments of delight for our client? So like you said, Ian, on that one, the experience is like, that's a system and a process in place. They've been trained every few minutes. They go over and check how you're getting on, how's your food, making sure that the water's within a certain amount of time. Like, they've understood that from a baseline level, so that everyone does that same thing. And like, when you look at trades and that element to it, if you're self-employed, one-man band on your own, and then you're wanting to expand out, if you don't have those services and you don't have that experience and how you make those people feel, and what is the representation of me being doubled 3 times, 4 times, you're always going to struggle. And going back to what you said about your trades friend that you knew, if you try and do that and you go out to 5 or 6, all of a sudden, like, you get stressful because you're like, hang on, like, why is this person doing a random job that is not how I would do it? And like, that's where you start to get those expectations versus reality, and that stresses that come with it.
Yeah.
Well, the perfect belief for people that are looking for that confidence or want that confidence, or they need to see something in action to truly believe it. Just look at flying. I've just flown back with Virgin or flown out there and flown back with Virgin. And the difference in the 3 sets of cabins financially are massive, like drastic. Flying economy, unbelievable, massive difference. And we were out there for my 40th, so it's the first time I'd ever flown upper class, and it was a first experience, and I wanted to experience it for my birthday. It's a big one. So we spent, when we booked the tickets at the cheapest, we booked them in January. I'll be open and honest with people. We spent £2,500 per seat for there and back for a return. The economy level was just under 500 quid. So, you know, the difference in £2,500 versus 500 quid, should we call it? We still went to the same destination. We were on the same plane, but the difference in the service, the difference in the seat, the difference in the meal, the difference in the experience when you got to the airport, the difference in the experience of the actual stewardess versus when you're out the back, getting on first, getting off first, priority bags, those little things don't cost Virgin a lot of money to do. Having a knife and fork that's metal versus not, having a plate and a tablecloth on your tray versus not. We're not talking crazy investment from Virgin to do that, but you'll pay 5-6x to experience it, to be in that scenario. And if anyone takes anything from this, is just think, you know, are you going upper class? Are you going just below upper class, like Rob says? But how close to that can you get? How close can you get that with your business, with your career, with your personality, with your mindset? How close can you get? Because if you set yourself a target and then add 20% to it, there's a very good chance you'll hit that target. Yeah,
double it every time. Every time I speak to somebody, whatever your target is, double it. Because if you're not thinking about the bigger bit, it'll never come to you. You have to literally be, seems a bit of a problem there. How would I do that? Well, that's going to require 5 vans. Well, it starts to open up. If you're thinking at 100% of where you want to be, I want to earn 100 grand. It may take you forever and a day to get there. If you start thinking of how you can make 200 grand, I guarantee you that the 100's going to come in half the time. And because we just need to see it. We need to be able to think it. We need to be able to figure out what questions do we need answering. You know, what do I know here? What don't I know here? But once you start to do it, and I think that's a block a lot of people have. I know Daren calls on the pricing, the council estate mentality. I get it. I think that we do have these ceiling limits, really, that have probably come down from our family, our environments, and everything else. We've seen how far people have got. But honestly, if you just think about it, I want to earn £1 million. I want to earn £10 million. That's a completely different two things. The number of clients you've got to speak to, your marketing's going to change, your dynamic's going to change of what you do. But honestly, whatever you're thinking of, if I could give any tip to anybody, if you're thinking of doing something, double it. And that'll get you it'll start getting you to think about what's possible. And I guarantee that you're going to achieve everything that you want to achieve in the outset and more, as long as you take the bigger step and the bigger look at how you're going to approach anything in your life.
100%. Great way to kind of summarize the review. I thought it was a really, really good, relatable episode. I think if you haven't listened to it, go back and listen to it, watch it. I've never met Daren before, but related to a lot of what he said. Great guy. If you're in the trades, someone that definitely you should be talking to, because he's going to get you to where you want to get to, or he's going to help you get yourself to where you want to get there through some accountability and some quick, easy wins by the sounds of it. So yeah, it was a brilliant episode, very relatable. It's great to mix up these guests with sports performance versus, you know, the pack themselves versus where we did, you know, kind of, we've got Gates, you know, when we had Gates involved as well versus Jobs, all of these things. And then to get people like Daren on to talk about business, and you know, we had James, didn't we, you know, kind of his episode come on as well. And if you listen to those two, James and Daren, and you're thinking of starting a business, or you're in the early days of starting a business, they're great episodes for people to take a lot of lessons from, I think. So really cool.
Last point on it, and I would say, is like, there's so many episodes of podcasts you can listen to of like people who, you know, I sold my business for this, but they had X amount of money, fundraising in the back end. And like, that is a great, amazing dream to have. But from like the fundamentals of why we created Project Peak Performance was like the every day person in the street. If you listen to Darren's podcast episode and you want to sell your business for a multi-million-pound figure, it can be achieved just by creating a driveway company. You don't have to think about
drives.
You know what I mean? You don't even have to think about VC fundraising, go out to America and getting all this sort of stuff, etc. It can be achieved from just someone who goes, right, what do I want to achieve and what I want to do from it? So it's definitely worth one of those listens.
Yeah.
And I'll finish off. He is in our community as well. So if there is any tradesman that want to have a chat with him, have a look in the community. You'll find him. And I'm sure he would love to. He'd love it if you reached out, and I'm sure he'd love to help you.
Yeah, and thanks, Daren, for joining us on the review with some of the comments as well. And thanks to everyone that's just watched this review. And if you're not watching live and you're listening back on podcast, Apple, Spotify, and you want to check in on these lives, then make sure you join the Facebook group, Project Peak Performance, the group, and then you can get the exclusive kind of drop on these a couple of days before they go out, and you can Q&A with us while we go live as well. So yeah, cracking episode, great review. And thank you for everyone that checked in with us. If you've got comments after we've gone live, we'll still see them. So throw them in the comments and we'll answer them throughout the day or throughout the week. And we'll be back. We'll be back next week with another banger. See you all soon.